Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 79.
79.
Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing this week. Sinners.
Yep.
Ryan Coogler.
Ryan Coogler.
Not Cougars.
No,
Not doing anything about Cougars.
Where we've seen your comments.
So, alongside reviewing the film, we'll talk about his work.
Yeah.
He's made a few films now. He's got a pretty sizable body of work under his belt.
Yes, he has. Most of which are franchise films.
Yes.
I would say. Or we're leaning towards the majority anyway.
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting because his first film, which I watched especially for this podcast, was very much almost sort of anti-franchise, anti kind of conventional narrative as well in many ways. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to sort of chart his journey and his career, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and the kind of, I think what makes him quite unique in one sense is that he is a filmmaker that, I guess, I mean, I hesitant to say hasn't compromised at all, because I think when you were working in, the thralls of the mainstream industry, you will have to make compromises. But I think here is a filmmaker that certainly,
he's kept his sort of his unique style kind of mostly intact.
Yeah,
maybe.
like his cinematic stylings, which I guess you could argue are more formally akin to blockbuster cinema anyway. But I guess sort of his thematic earnestness and the way that he executes them in these kinds of narratives that are purpose-built for mass entertainment.
Yeah.
And still managing to make interesting stories along the way. So yeah, lots to talk about, lots to unpack. Let's do it now.
Let's go.
Just before we kick off the Coogler discussion, I want to clarify that your original remarks about cougars.
Yeah.
Were you discussing the North American mountain lion?
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what else it would be.
No, me neither.
Look it up in the dictionary.
Yeah, I just thought...
Not the urban one.
No, definitely not that one. Don't type it into the internet either on its own. Unless you put North American. Even then, it could be dangerous.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Feels like they pioneered that.
I think so. Yeah.
Culturally at the forefront.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, we've always said it.
We're going to get into that.
And more.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan.
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of alluded to it in the intro, but a filmmaker that's the vast majority of his career has been spent working in and around franchises.
Yeah.
Obviously started out in relatively humble beginnings, Fruitvalestation, debut film, fresh out of film school, $900,000.
Was that it? Is that the budget?
Yeah, that's the budget. So, and then from that point onwards, really, he went straight into studio filmmaking with Creed.
Yep.
And then Black Panther, and then the follow-up, Wakanda Forever.
Yeah.
And, of course, Sinners, which is obviously different because it isn't tied to a pre-existing property.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it is interesting to see this kind of, like, this journey. Because, as you said, starting out with Fruitvalestation, which is very much it's very much an independent film.
Yeah, it's like a Sundance film. It sort of takes pride in being shot on 16mm, one of those.
Yeah.
And very like verite, I suppose you call it.
Yeah, agreed. It's
We're getting into big words.
Yes,
verite.
throw that in there. Kino.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I guess it's not necessarily his trajectory isn't a totally unfamiliar one. I think Marvel for a long time plucked a lot of filmmakers from the independent circle to sort of helm their films.
Yeah.
The cynic in me thinks that's done in large part because a filmmaker without a credible back catalogue of work makes them more easily molded by the kind of demands of the studio.
I imagine so. Yeah, they can't demand final cut on indie projects yet.
No.
Why would they?
How can they sort of stand up against a corporate behemoth like Marvel films,
Yeah, also they're probably not in a position to negotiate their salary hugely. No. I mean, they'd get more than their debut, but it won't be like 20 million, will it?
No.
It'll be maybe half. No, even less than that.
I have no idea, actually.
No, I don't know.
There's a side of it I don't really know a great deal about, but I think from a creative perspective, it's a kind of shrewd move from a sort of business perspective, and I sort of hate giving those kinds of people any credit, but ultimately they're they kind of pick these filmmakers because they have something about them which they think will suit the kind of broader narrative arc that they've employed.
Yes.
But they can also, because of that lack of name, they can sort of subdue it to suit their kind of long-term kind of financial goals.
And also they can have the sort of credibility as well. They can be like, well, we've selected an indie filmmaker, right?
Yeah,
like, look at us. Yeah, we're not just a kind of like soulless corporate sort of
content machine.
Yeah. We make creative choices as well. And look at this creative choice we make. Chloe Zhao. Oh, she just won an Oscar. You know that
backfired for them.
And now they're not going to do it as much for that reason, which is also sad. You can't win, can you?
No. I was thinking that because I think she was too established though.
For she's made a fair few.
And I think, and I'm not saying that's a problem. I think she's a fantastic filmmaker, but I mean, the kind of rumor is that they did kind of like
they wheedle their way in a bit.
Yeah, or was it more that she had a bit more control than other filmmakers usually have? I don't know. I mean,
okay, and it made it maybe
because they adopted an approach to kind of like reflect the kind of criticism towards Marvel as kind of. I don't know.
Seen it?
No,
so I don't know. I've heard really mixed things. I've heard some people like are kind of apologists for it, and maybe there'll be some kind of retro affection for it. I don't know, but
purely because of that reason, perhaps.
Maybe, yeah. But it's always an interesting decision when they make that they kind of pick these filmmakers as opposed to just picking like Mark Forster, for example. A safe pair of hands.
Yeah.
I guess as long as they are confident that these people can point a camera at something, then it doesn't matter, and it's probably like a reasonable financial decision for them as well to do. Absolutely. So. Yeah,
and that's where I think Coogler stands out from a lot of those kinds of filmmakers because, I mean, we'll get a bit more into Black Panther later, but just generally speaking, he is he's a filmmaker that hasn't really compromised on that too much.
No.
I mean, Black Panther's still very much structurally and formally, it's a Marvel movie through and through, but, there is a lot more in there than the vast majority of Marvel fare.
Yeah.
And it resonated, obviously, on a cultural level, it was hugely significant. It showcased a culture that certainly hasn't had such a kind of focus on it, particularly within mainstream Western cinema.
I know, yeah. I mean, you can't accuse it of tokenism.
No,
that's for sure.
No,
which arguably could be leveled at some other Marvel films.
Yeah,
definitely not this one. This is like, kind of embraces a culture as opposed to just kind of sidelining it and just putting it on out for display. You know?
Sort of cherry picking some kind of like superficial visual stuff.
Throwaway lines and stuff like that.
Yeah, it definitely embodies the culture that it's wanting to kind of put center stage, and I think Coogler's a huge part of that.
Yeah.
And you can see that kind of, in Fruitvale Station. I think, obviously, comparatively, much more subdued.
Oh yeah.
But it is a movie that has a real sort of quiet fury to it, and rightly so, given the subject matter.
Yes. I found it really interesting because it didn't shy away from showing the kind of darker side of the main character played by Michael B. Jordan. He clearly is struggling with a few things like sort of past. Basically, he's been incarcerated in the past, and you can tell that lifestyle is on the cusp of leaving him. It's not quite there yet, and he's making some really good decisions, but he's also sort of lapsing into more familiar territory, and he doesn't shy away from that. It's not just about reform, it's about complexity, and I really liked that about Fruitvale Station.
Absolutely, yeah. So for those who haven't seen the film, it's about a man called Oscar Grant who... And it follows him for a day leading up to his murder by police in Fruitvale Station on the New Year's Eve 2008, 2009?
Yeah, around then. Yeah. I think it's 2008, actually. Yeah.
So, there is a kind of sense of inevitability in the film which generates tension anyway.
Yeah.
But Coogler finds ways through Michael B. Jordan's fantastic performance. To kind of, like you say, connect to those imperfections and make a sort of far more fully rounded human being. It's just someone that has been incarcerated and has, in many ways, is kind of even though he's in the midst of this transition to something better, I think he's struggling with that transition because of those decisions made in his past.
Yeah.
And what I particularly liked about the film as well is that there was this kind of omnipresent suggestion of the kind of wider socio-political implications. You know, it was, you know, why are they making these kinds of decisions that would render them, you know, incarcerated?
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right that there's a real level of complexity there in the presentation of that, and the way in which he kind of like strives for decency, and the way these attempts are almost battered back. You know, that has its own. There's another story in there.
Yeah, there is.
You know, and it kind of almost runs parallel to the kind of central story, which we know the ending of.
Yes, yeah. You see it in the real mobile phone footage, don't you? At the beginning, right at the beginning, before the opening credits.
Yeah.
So you know what's going to happen, like you say, but then you get a chance to get to know the guy basically, and it's really like
there's an intimacy.
Fulfilling. Yeah.
There's a real intimacy to the film that generates tension because through that closeness, you see really a really decent person.
Yeah.
You know, a person that despite all of these struggles and difficulties, there are flickers of like what could have been and should have been that were stolen away from him.
Yeah.
And Jordan is just so naturally charismatic that he can do those. He can have those moments, and they just have so much weight.
Yeah.
You know, he is just a very charismatic performer. But he also can bring those kind of layers of complexity, which, you know, I don't think he gets enough credit actually.
Michael B. Jordan?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
I don't really hear him in a lot of discussions as like a really, you know, one of the great sort of up and coming actors. He never comes up enough for me.
It's funny. I was talking to my colleague today actually about him, and I kind of said that he does know what lane he knows the sort of lane that he's good at. Like he doesn't, for example, he doesn't kind of do the sort of De Niro-y type thing, or like a sort of gaining or losing weight, or you know, that kind of traditional method actory type stuff, like accents and that. But he does play different characters really, really well, and really subtly well. Like I agree. I don't think he gets nearly enough credit, and I'll go talk about that more with regards to Sinners as well, and his dual performance in that. And even Creed, like he carries that film really.
Yeah, he's fantastic in it.
He's probably the best thing about that film.
I think him. I really thought Stallone was special actually. In that film.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
You know,
there is a sadness about.
Yeah, Stallone really embodied it really well.
I mean, that's the character.
He knows it so well, doesn't he? But I think that willingness to kind of transition with that character to a more kind of, I guess, arguably quite a cynical turn for him. Because, I mean, if you see the interviews of Stallone talking about Rocky, you know, his reasoning for it was that a lot of films of the new Hollywood era were very cynical.
Yeah.
And he wanted to make something more uplifting. So I think, you know, ideologically, he kind of believes perhaps more in the American dream than a lot of the filmmakers around him did at the time.
Yeah.
And whether you agree with that's a different argument. But, you know, his films, particularly, well, obviously not Rambo, the first Rambo anyway. But, you know, like, you know, the Rocky films do embody that kind of gutsy, never say die spirit, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay.
That I think actually Coogler does a really great job of kind of remolding to suit this kind of new era in that franchise, and well, it knew then.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting to me that he went from Fruitvale Station. There is this really sort of like intimate, complex portrayal of just a horrible crime.
Yeah, institutional racism, definitely kind of the way it's portrayed is really interesting in the sense that you can kind of tell just from the body language of these police officers that there's an assumption that these men are being violent when they're not. And the reason that they're acting in this like kind of heavily defensive manner, which leads to a fatality, spoilers obviously, but you kind of, you know where this is going, like, and the reason for that nervousness and that kind of, you know, the sort of lack of composure is because the
lack of empathy too.
Total lack of empathy, yes. And you can tell it's because these are sort of, it's a group of young black men, and that's the only reason they're acting in this fashion. And you get the kind of different weird male behavior, and one of them's sort of like putting a front up and pretending to be like a kind of big man, and the other guys are just like scrambling around for their weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
He does that so well. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. I know we were kind of going on to.
No. I think he's right, because I think that, I think it's interesting in the context of Coogler more broadly, because it's such a there is an intimacy to that film that, like you say, it betrays. It gives Jordan's portrayal of Oscar Grant a complexity, and I think that he carries over into his kind of like more mainstream, the more mainstream kind of movies, the franchise film, and Creed is particularly interesting for that reason, because it sort of wavered by that point, and no one really saw it coming back. I mean, I know Stallone came back, didn't he?
Yes.
Fairly, I can't remember.
Rocky Balboa.
Yeah. How long ago?
2007, I think. So
2007.
2007, yeah. 2007.
Sorry, I don't know why I
it's a
called you that.
podcasting thing. I don't know why I've adopted it. People on podcasts do it. So
2007?
Yeah, they don't say 2000 and they say 20. Yeah. It's like an American podcasty type.
Right,
In fact, these guys are Australian, but whatever. Yeah, 2007 was when Rocky Balboa came out. I didn't like that film, actually.
No, I didn't really. It was everything that was shit about kind of legacy movies.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that Coogler, who brings that kind of sense of these kinds of filmmaking sensibilities that are so earthy and so, and he does translate a lot of that style so kind of seamlessly into this kind of like gutsy, very kind of like emotionally overblown kind of style that Rocky has always been so great at. I mean, the good ones anyway.
Yeah.
And I think the transition works really well.
Yeah, no, agreed. It's been a while since I've seen Creed, but
I watched it for what felt like the first time the other day, and I was really struck by it. I just thought, it was a really interesting take on what a legacy film is. Like, I liked that there was a kind of bitterness and a cynicism about legacy, not just from the perspective of Stallone's character, but also, from Adonis Creed himself. Like, he's bitter about his legacy for many reasons. One, because he's an illegitimate child.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
And secondly, because his dad's this just great athlete, one of the titans in the sport.
Yeah.
And to inherit that name means that you are going to be always viewed in almost as in the shadow of this kind of great figure.
Yeah, I mean, it's no accident he's called Adonis. I think for that reason, like he's going to inherit that, the name, and he's going to be basically, there's going to invite comparison.
Yeah, well, it always does, doesn't it? And and the thing about legacy as well, I think, which is particularly interesting, and it works, I think, more broadly speaking, in terms of Coogler's career, maybe at this point, but people are going to have assumptions and ideas about you before you've even started by name alone. So much of legacy, there's a burdensome nature to legacy, which I think a lot of people who are the kind of spawn of these kind of great athletes or great artists or anything, they it's almost like they've lost before they've even started.
Yeah,
because they'll never be as good as the person that they're born from or from the seed of.
Yes.
And you see it all the time with a lot of these kinds of like celebrity children that just do really weird and bizarre things, and you kind of think the reason they're probably doing that is to get away from the fact that they're from their parents' shadow. I don't know.
Yeah. No, agreed. Even you could argue that like Sofia Coppola went through all that when she was like basically kind of critically shat on when she was in Godfather Part 3, and like she sort of crawled out of that now. Obviously she's a very accomplished director in her own right,
absolutely,
arguably better than her dad in some ways. I think Francis Ford Coppola obviously has made more like successful and kind of well-known films, but there's something about his daughter's work which is more interesting in some ways. Anyway, I'm talking about the wrong filmmaker.
No.
Yeah, but no, you're right. It's a troublesome and failed before you've even began kind of situation.
And it invites the kind of cynicism which really bogs down the films, maybe even an hour. Like,
oh yes, the central theme for sure.
Yeah,
about living in your dad's shadow. Yeah.
I just thought it was a really refreshing way to take on the idea of a legacy sequel, and it brings up more broader questions about the nature of these kinds of films anyway, and what they actually mean, and what their role is. Is their role just to, we said about this in the context of Minecraft, even though it's not a sequel, but the way it treats memory. You know, is this just to remind you of something?
Yeah.
Or are you actually going to sort of push this on and kind of have a meaningful reflection on memory?
Yeah.
And a story that kind of, whilst simultaneously embodying a lot of the kind of values of the original films, you know. I just think Coogler deserves such a huge amount of credit for making that work, because he's balancing a lot of plates there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and not only that, he doesn't pander to the sort of the expectations of audiences who obviously love Rocky. I mean, Rocky is one of those franchises. I mean, it's, you know, it's kind of a bit like a dad franchise, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because the original, I think the first three, I'd say, are great. You know,
I mean, the first one's incredible.
The first one's so good, and it, you know,
people remember that film. People who haven't seen it remember Rocky. Like they know the training montage, right? And it's like, I'm glad Creed didn't pander to that.
Yeah.
Right? I'm glad it well, that was the whole theme of the film, is it wanted to be its own thing. It wanted to be, you know, kind of take on a style of its own. And you can definitely tell that those themes kind of were at the forefront of Coogler's mind when he was making it.
Yeah.
And the screenwriter and everyone involved in making it.
I think he co-wrote Creed, I think.
Yeah, okay. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Interesting.
With Stallone, or?
No, Stallone wasn't
he not
involved
write
in the writing. No.
Okay. Well, yeah.
It's also got this really great moment in it, one of my favourite moments, that's got no boxing in it. But it reminded me, do you know the scene in Fruitvale Station where Oscar picks up that dog that's hit by a car?
Oh, fuck, yeah.
And that's just such like a brief, fleeting scene.
Just a moment of compassion.
Yeah, that's what I think Coogler's so good at, is those little forays away from the central narrative, but they're just so instructive.
Oh, there's a big moment, yeah.
And there's another moment like that in Creed where there's this sort of kid drives past him or up to him on one of those like dirt bikes. Apparently they're really big in is it Philly?
Philadelphia, yeah.
I literally watched it yesterday. I've already forgotten where the film's set. And he like drives up to me and goes, "Are you Apollo Creed's son?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he says something like, "Just how it is, isn't it?" Or something like that. And he just drives off and does a wheelie. Just this one moment where like it informs so much about this character's how he's wrestling with this legacy and how much it burdens him. And there's just one little interaction. And I just thought, God, what a great scene.
Yeah.
Just wheelies off down the street. And I was like, God, that's just what Coogler's so good at, is those little moments, you know? And the fact that you could still sort of squeeze those into a kind of blockbuster movie, or definitely like a franchise film that's obviously, you're going to have increased influence from the people who are funding it, and a lot of the decisions they're going to impose upon you creatively are going to be born from, I think, what they approximate the kind of fans of the franchise's expectations to be.
Yeah.
And just to have those little moments, you know, these kind of Fruitvale Station style moments.
They don't have any...
Superb.
Definitely, yeah. They don't have any bearing on the plot as a whole. Sinners is filled with those moments as well, actually.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that a bit later on, but like, yeah, that bit with the dog is really, you know, so arguably you could imagine, you know, imagine if you're like a studio exec and the film's too long, that would be one of the scenes you'd say, get rid of it. For a start, it's pretty upsetting, and you don't want to upset your audience if you're a studio exec.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's in there means that you go from being slightly unsure of Oscar as a character and thinking, oh, maybe this guy is, you know, he's going through a lot. Do I, you know, am I 100% with him? And then this moment, even if you're not a dog lover, like, is just like, I am with you. You're a good man. Like, your heart is in the right place and always has been. You're just a victim of a circumstance, and also, you know, perhaps a troubled upbringing. Who knows? Or perhaps, like, I mean, actually don't know a great deal about the real Oscar Grant, but you know, it kind of invites that way of thinking. Yeah. And from then on, no matter what he does, you're kind of like, I know you tried to save that dog. And you're totally right. I didn't think about it. I completely forgot about that scene, actually.
There's also another great moment where he has that discussion with that guy who's like the IT support guy. Or he's got an IT company, and him and his wife goes into the toilet with Oscar's partner.
Yes.
And they have just a little chat. And that was one of those moments what I was alluding to earlier, where it's like, that's a potential opportunity that he could have taken. Do you know what I mean? And it's like...
Oh, that moment.
Yeah, and he kind of, the guy says, I had nothing, and he gives him a business card, and it's like a really nice interaction. It's You know,
you just see something in him. He's just like, oh, well, you could be, you know, if you're looking for a potential new path and a way of maybe earning a bit of an income for you and your family, then this is the way forward. And like, nice moment.
Just tiny little snippets of hope, but not in a sort of fairy tale manner. They're kind of these organic little interactions, and
he doesn't like look at the business card as he's sort of bleeding out, does he? Like you just,
No,
but
Jesus
you know
Christ,
it's
no.
there, right? That's what that could have been a really naff storytelling device.
For sure.
Had Coogler not been involved, or you know, it could have been a studio note. It's just like, just remind people of that opportunity that he had. You know, opportunity. What? No. Keep that in. It's good. It's good stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think it obviously being like a kind of indie kind of movie, maybe there weren't too many studio notes, but I could totally see your point that, you know, that if that film was made in a kind of more traditional sort of Hollywood way, you can imagine those kind of like insensitive notes being given.
Yeah, and like just notes like, "Oh, you've got to bring it back to the dog" or something. Just make it a narrative, sort of circular narrative, and that kind of stuff. And some films benefit from that kind of storytelling, but I don't think Coogler needs it in his work.
No, I mean it's not a film that I think needs to pander to sort of mainstream convention because it's not, you know, 900,000. I mean, that's still obviously an obscene amount of money, but you know, comparatively, you know, I don't think many. In comparison to his later films, I mean, I don't think.
No, yeah.
And that, again, you know, that's what makes that kind of transition to Creed. I know we've sort of talked about quite a lot, but there is still a kind of intimacy that he really fuses well with the kind of, because there is kind of like a training montage moment, and you know, when he's like running and all the guys are driving behind him on motorbikes and stuff. But it's, I don't know, like,
Does
I
it
just
fit nicely. I can't actually remember.
Yeah, it fits really well. Like, I just thought this is kind of like, you know, heart on its sleeve. There's a complexity in the way that the emotions intertwine with the aforementioned themes around legacy that we've discussed, but I think there's a real heart on its sleeve, sort of plucky underdog story, which is what Rocky's always been about. It's a celebration of the underdog, and you know, and again, there's an optimism there that you know that a lot of his peers' films didn't have, but I think Rocky earned that, you know, because it was just so earnest. Whether you agree with the kind of overarching messages, I don't know. Like I think maybe with a film like Rocky, I'm just so willing to be swept up by that, and I think the brilliance of Coogler's adaptation of those ideas is probably central to the reasons to why I was really. It felt like I watched the first Rocky for the first time, you know.
Yeah.
And that's like a rare thing with these legacy films, because a lot of them either directly sort of riff off the original, purely to sort of remind the audience of the original's existence, or they just make a complete hash of any attempt to bring it forward because they don't acknowledge why these things are so important, you know? It still had heart to it. Yes, it's bitter and cynical at the start, but, you know, that's the perfect narrative foundation for the kind of ideas that the Rocky films have always been about, you know?
Yeah.
And again, Jordan's superb.
Yes.
But the relationship between him and Stallone, I thought was excellent. I thought it was so well balanced. And when we talk about this idea of Stallone being this kind of symbol of American optimism, I think it was really interesting that was subverted, at least initially.
Yeah, I do remember. Yeah, it sort of did really well what I thought Rocky Balboa didn't quite achieve, which was flipping the kind of optimism on its head a bit and allowing other people to inhabit that, embody the optimism that he's clearly yearning for, and he's sort of living through him for a bit, and obviously takes him on as his sort of protege.
But because of that relationship with his father, which is obviously such a big part of his life and a big part of his guilt, and the reason why he doesn't, you know, he's not so willing to return to the ring at first, you know.
It has that kind of classic narrative.
There's so many classic tropes there, man, but it just works, and it just shows that if you do it well and you're respectful and you're prepared to go all in, and you know, you can make something with the old tropes and still be fucking great.
Yeah.
So then after Creed, which I guess was a pretty good audition for Black Panther.
Yes.
In a way.
Yeah, I imagine, you know, he's proved himself as a competent director who can deliver a really like hard-hitting story, and also he can have a franchise resting on his shoulders comfortably.
Yeah.
now it's time for the big leagues, which in 2018, obviously there's a lot of skepticism in the industry around Marvel these days, understandably so. I was starting to feel that skepticism.
Well, you've always been quite skeptical.
Yeah, it's because I don't get on with I didn't never really got on with reading comic books, so I've never had that much of a yearning or interest in them. I like some of the films, like I admire some of the early ones, and
You've got a soft spot for the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans. And
of course. Right? I mean, they're just they work beautifully.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah.
But at this point in time, if I had said, in fact, I remember saying to my colleagues, I'm getting a bit sick of Marvel films, getting a lot of shit for it. A lot of people were really, really religiously invested in this franchise, and they were really, 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 really excited for all of the kind of branches that the franchise was kind of clinging on to, and this was one of them, Black Panther. And I mean, it did pay off. It was a very, very successful.
Is it 1.4 billion?
Yeah, I lost a quiz question recently because I.
I remember you saying in the outro of the last episode.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I did say that, didn't I? So yeah, the question was about Best Picture nominees and superhero films, and I thought it was The Dark Knight. It wasn't. It was this. Yeah, and it won a couple.
It won three.
Jesus.
Best original score, best costume, and best design.
Production design. Yeah. Which is really, really impressive.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There is obviously a lot of, and even then, I think there was a kind of growing sense of discontent level towards superhero films as to their effectiveness in terms of the kind of stories they were telling. I think a lot of people felt, and still feel, I should say, that they don't really reflect the kinds of narratives that they feel that the comic books do.
Okay, yeah.
I think you could argue that I think there's something in that significant, especially more so now. And I guess it's easy to say now that they're having a bit of a wobble, but I think, they very quickly established a narrative style. I know we've talked about this a lot, but, the ability to kind of tell stories without ever forgetting the commitment to the wider universe, both as a storytelling device, but primarily as a marketing device, was something that they cracked pretty early doors. And, I think that's one of the huge reasons why there is so much cynicism towards these films.
Yeah.
Because they can't stand alone. The people behind these films are seemingly terrified of them standing alone, because it's always got to be constant reminders, how these narratives are built. They're built, not all, they're built to kind of, again, this might sound cynical, but to my mind, they're built to sell lunchboxes.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean there isn't love and passion from creatives involved. Of course there is, but, it's high. It got increasingly difficult for me to not see that every time I went to see a Marvel movie.
Yeah, okay.
But I think what Black Panther did was that I think it, obviously, from a marketing point of view, was a huge hit and a huge success. But there is something that feels quite self-contained about that film.
Yeah,
I definitely feel like it was given more space to be its own thing.
Okay, yeah.
And to really sort of push a culture center stage, and also approach that with a kind of complexity that you don't often see in Marvel movies.
Yeah.
Just thinking about the kind of African diaspora, like the struggles of that, or wrestling with the kind of horrors of colonialism and identity, and the way in which this kind of like mythical nation of Wakanda, which is this kind of like technologically dominant superpower, but within that there's this kind of argument about whether they should kind of like use that power as leverage to kind of improve the lives of black people everywhere, or should they stay insular? And there's all these kind of little conflicts throughout the movie, which kind of which you just don't expect from a Marvel movie, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I think it deserved credit for a brief period of kind of like interrogating the ethical conundrums around counterterrorism, as in kind of surveillance as a method for counterterrorism and potentially inhibiting the freedoms of more than just people that have terrorist inclinations, and kind of dripping it in this kind of like parallax view, sort of Cold War era anxiety.
Yeah,
and that wrestled with that and did a fairly good job of it for a little bit.
Yeah.
But it didn't stick the landing. And I think you could argue that as a sort of complete package, in terms of this delivery of the themes, Black Panther is probably one of the best examples in the Marvel cinematic universe for that, really.
Yeah, definitely. I remember thinking it was more impressive than most of the Marvel films I'd seen up until that point. I thought it had its problems with regards to like quality control of a lot of the computer generated imagery in the latter part of the film, the train, right? I mean, a lot of people level criticism on that. It was basically
Marvel's typically has a lot of criticism for that. I think because of the overuse of it.
yeah, and also I think they ran out. It's clear they ran out of time, and it's a real shame to see it in a film like this, which in a lot of respects is kind of very polished, script wise and thematically polished. It's a shame that the kind of visuals weren't always up to scratch. Only in certain sequences as well, it kind of sort of smells a bit of studio interference. I do wonder what scene was in its place, and how much of a better film it could have been had it been, or a worse one. I don't know. It's
interesting, isn't it? Because it's still, in many ways, it still feels quite Marvel-y.
Yeah.
Like the action sequences are quite Marvel-y.
Yeah, there's nothing new with most of them.
No, I mean, I think Coogler does have a kind of handheld dynamism that he employs, particularly within the first few action sequences.
Yeah.
But it does get more Marvel-y in its action as it goes on. There has to be like a big set piece, basically, which is Marvel's bread and butter, isn't it? Can't have those audiences getting bored.
Certainly not. No.
Otherwise they won't buy the lunch boxes.
Look at this. You like Wakanda? Cut away from Wakanda. Look at this. No. Enjoying Wakanda.
Yeah.
Music and stuff.
I could have happily stayed with these characters for a bit longer in a more sort of sedate narrative.
Yeah.
But no, we've got to have rhinos.
It has to happen.
It's a cool idea.
Yeah. We've got to have a big train
like Ridley
fight.
Scott kind of thing. Do you know, like we did with Gladiator with the rhino? I was like, what the fuck is going on? This is mental.
Then a rhino appears.
Yeah. Clad in armour with a fella on top. Made more sense in Black Panther. It's interesting, isn't it? I think there's always going to be, from snobs like us, there's always going to be that element of criticism towards Marvel.
Yeah.
But, I think it's largely justified. But I do want to say, on the cultural element, obviously, it'd be difficult for me to make any kind of, for obvious reasons, to sort of, say something definitive. But I, at the time, was working in Showcase. And when that film had come out, and just the excitement from so many people, from so many backgrounds, children dressed in it, and it just felt different. It didn't feel like any of the superheroes. It felt like, I don't know, you just sort of...
Yeah, it's nice.
You're seeing the power of what these kinds of characters can do for people.
Yeah.
And how they can enrich people and make them feel part of something, And that was just a really lovely thing to see. Even though it was really busy and it was horrible. But there were moments you'd break
Better than
away.
Like a 50 Shades Darker, though.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Finding bottles with condoms on in the cinema screens,
Oh, God.
Lots of heavy petting.
Oh.
Not from me. Lots of cougars in there, actually.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. It was just a really kind of like quite lovely thing to see. And I think that's... I don't know, I think that's one of the reasons why the film, I don't know, its thematic conviction, I think, is a large part for that reason. It wasn't just, like you say, tokenism. It wasn't because I think a lot of people would have seen through that, and I don't think it would have anywhere near, obviously, it wouldn't have had anywhere near the cultural impact that it did.
No.
But just seeing that on the ground level.
Yeah.
So to speak. I'm not sure if a cinema's the ground level, but...
Ground level of something.
Well, not Cabot Circus, actually. It's like 2 or 3 floors up.
That's true, yeah. Gone now, of course.
I know. R.I.P. God.
No, yeah, I like the idea that it could have made $1.4 billion off of that, right? Of getting people genuinely hyped, getting children excited to the point where they're dressing up, and
feeling that they're being, feeling that their culture is sort of being properly presented to the world.
Yeah.
And not just the culture, but the complexities of that culture, and why it is that there are so many difficulties and struggles in presenting that culture in a meaningful way. What does that say about the kind of the world that we live in, and the way in which so many of these people now live as a result of the history that we share? And I just thought it was a really, for a Marvel movie, a very powerful mediation and all of those things. It didn't mince its words as much as a 12A Marvel film could.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think Coogler deserves a huge amount of credit for that.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine operating in the Marvel machinery is not easy.
I mean, it's defeated a fair few directors.
Yeah, I mean, James Gunn's always come out and said how easy it was. And I find that interesting, given that he was a filmmaker that wasn't really that bankable. I mean, his film before, was it Super? His film before Guardians.
So was really polarizing that. Yeah.
So they brought him in based on the fact that he had this kind of like these dark sensibilities.
Yeah.
Which obviously he had to sort of soften considerably for Guardians, but and Guardians became a sleeper hit. So it's really strange to me that, I mean, obviously, I guess he's one of the sort of real success stories of that kind of approach and model.
Yeah.
Aside from maybe the Russos, but...
Yeah, but their filmography was even weird. They were just
I mean, their
comedy
filmography post that is shite.
Awful, yeah. A return to mediocrity.
Yeah. Because it's apparently Feige's quite concerned about their decline.
Is he?
I think he's a lot more active.
Okay.
Can only mean a good thing.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Going to buy the lunchbox on the way home. Thanks, Kevin. Might just get a Kevin Feige lunchbox.
Just a Kevin Feige,
yeah. And they're like the Russo brothers in a guillotine.
Yeah, well, they will be if you fuck this up.
Connel, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I saw a review in 2018, Black Panther, and then we went to see Isle of Dogs on the same day.
Yeah, we did a double bill, didn't we?
Yeah.
Which one did we do first?
I think it was Black Panther first.
Right.
And then Isle of Dogs afterwards.
Yeah.
How
strange.
Yeah. I just point out, actually, I haven't seen Wakanda Forever.
No. At work, I watched a fair bit of it, but not... I should have watched a lot. I've just got Marvel fatigue.
Yeah, no.
So it does put me off watching anything. But
I heard more mixed things, and I heard...
Well, it's a send-off film, isn't it?
Yes.
The death of Chadwick Boseman was obviously a considerable shock to pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that film carries that shock and tries to kind of...
Tries to make sense of it in a franchise movie, which must have been a challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
Got good reviews by all accounts. I just heard, like, from an audience perspective, it was an apt memorial, but as a kind of piece of entertainment, didn't quite land. That's what I heard anyway.
Okay.
Which is it's just a shame. But I mean, how else did you want to do it? I suppose you got to pay tribute.
It's a very tricky route to go down. Isn't it?
Yeah. And maybe it's amazing. Like, I haven't seen it, so
I've seen quite a lot of it, and I thought, I mean, I can see what's going on here.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's difficult when you're balancing this kind of send off with the expectations of the kind of formula.
The
aforementioned, sort of stuff that goes underneath that, the expectations from upstairs, and also just making an enjoyable movie. It's hard to do those things.
Oh, mate.
And I got the impression I mean, again, probably should have watched it, but I got the impression that there is sort of it's not particularly cohesive in its elements. But I don't know. I haven't seen it, so maybe I'll watch it and then we'll do a
hot take. We haven't seen Wakanda Forever. I'm not beating myself up too much about that, to be fair.
No, by that point I was kind of really over it.
Yeah.
So I kind of just I've chimed away from all of it. I've not seen any of the new ones post.
No. After Endgame, I haven't seen any. Apart from, let's just not forget Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Oh yeah, we did see that
episode 8 or something that we did.
Yeah. God, that was wank.
Yeah, it was.
Fucking hell, that was so shit, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I kind of always feel a bit bad being that kind of definitive and monosyllabic about certain films, but that was just crap.
Yeah,
and I don't feel bad about anyone in that context because they still got paid millions for it. So yeah, I'm not going to feel too guilty.
No,
about saying that.
Everyone earned their bucks.
Oh, fucking yeah. God, yeah. Anyway.
Sinners. We saw this Wednesday?
Last Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah. And I'd heard really great things about it. And it it kind of worried me slightly, because usually when that happens, the film to me is always a slight disappointment, like in that classic way of overhyping it. And I was really surprised it was actually better than I expected.
I thought the trailer, because we saw the trailer a few times, and I remember both me and you, we never really spoken much about it when we spoke about trailers after we've come out of the cinema, and I just think that the trailer is not a reflection of how good the film is.
No.
The trailer is so poor.
Yeah, it is actually.
Like, it doesn't make the film look shit by any means, but it just does not reflect what the film's about. I mean, in a way, that's probably, something that might work to
bold
its
marketing
benefit,
choice, but yeah, I didn't. It was just that shot of him rolling the cigarette at the end of the film, wasn't it, for a bit, and then like some dancing without any of the amazing music in it. The marketing for me didn't land at all, but
I mean, I think the quality of the film has spoke for itself, and I think that's almost become its own marketing.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Sometimes that happens, the film just does it.
Yeah,
and I think Coogler's name's enough for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, definitely at this point, and Michael B. Jordan as well,
of course. Yeah,
in a dual role as previously mentioned.
It's got a great cast. This film,
yeah, really good cast.
Derby's own Jack O'Connell, of course.
Jack O'Connell, who there's a couple of really outstanding moments with him as well, and his character's interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
He's not relegated.
No, he's not. I'm with you, man. Like I really, it's been a while since I've been to the cinema and just had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun,
but in a way that's classic to the kind of things that we've spoken about with Coogler. Like, there is so much depth there that you just don't get in Hollywood anymore. You just don't get it,
especially in original material.
I mean, this film was what, 90, 100 million.
90 to, about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's by no means cheap, but comparatively to its kind of like the aforementioned Marvel machine and other these kind of big movies, it's cheap.
Oh yeah,
it's more mid-budget now, isn't it? Really, given the way that so much money gets thrown at the big films these days. So, but I just thought it was so refreshing in the way it handled, particularly memory. This idea of a collective memory, and the way in which music particularly is a tether to an uprooted culture.
Yes.
And as this kind of culture has changed and the history has changed and the music has changed to reflect that, it never loses its origin.
Yes.
In this kind of uprooted culture, and an uprooted culture that, is victim to commodification from the same people,
diluting
that uprooted them in the first place. And I just felt that was a really interesting mediation on those ideas, particularly if you think about it as well from Coogler's perspective as a filmmaker, making these kinds of films that pretty much all of his films very much center around these ideas about black identity and the kind of the way that the black experience integrates and interacts with the world around it. And that in itself is interesting because I think there's a danger that could become commodified. Because studios are going to see see potential. And I'm not saying this in any way as a negative on Coogler. I just mean that the way the Hollywood machine works, as we've said, they're not always the most sensitive when it comes to these things. And
no.
I thought I just think it was an interesting comment from him about his journey as a filmmaker and the battles that he's probably had to have to get these kinds of films about his culture. And I thought it tied in really interestingly with the kind of ideas around music as well. As a kind of, these sort of rebellious reverberations, that's kind of how he just conveys it so wonderfully.
I love, there's a standout scene. Those of you who've seen it will know exactly the scene I'm talking about, which is where Sammy, I'm right thinking the character who is
Smoke and Stack.
Yes, you got Smoke and Stack played by Michael B. Jordan.
Oh, sorry, Sammy's the musician.
And it's his turn to perform, and the scene is basically an amalgamation of his song and the music from the past and the music from the present, and the music from the future, and it just shouldn't work, but it does, and it's just like such a testament to how carefully planned and how and also just how how transcendent music can be. And I mean that genuinely. Like, I'm not saying that to take the piss. Like, it sounds like a really wanky thing to say, but it really does work in this film.
Yeah.
You get the impression that the kind of roots of this music and where it is at that point in time and where it's going as well, all in like a single scene, which is just like so
bold.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I remember when it first started, I was a bit like, oh.
I know, same with the guitar. I was like,
yeah. But it just completely took me, and I was like, fuck, this is awesome.
I've been listening to the soundtrack.
Such a cool
actually.
movement.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
I
Yeah.
have. Yeah, there's a couple of songs. The one we're talking about now is called it's called "Don't Lie to Me."
Yes.
Or,
yeah.
Or,
Because it's about his dad, who's a preacher, isn't it?
yes, that's right. Yeah, and
yeah.
then you have I Lie to You, I think it's called, and then and you have Pale Pale Moon. There's a few different versions of that song in there as well, which I just like really enjoy. And then there's some Irish music in it as well, which I was like equally on board with.
Yeah, well, another uprooted culture.
Another uprooted
oppressed culture. You know?
Yeah.
I just think that's it's a, you know, it's obviously no mistake that Irish music's included, even if it is the music of or the culture of the antagonist. It still has root in the same ideas that the heroes of the film.
Yeah,
you know, and it's almost as a motivational factor that still comes from the same place. There's even a line Jack O'Connell's character says, like, you know, they said that to me they're doing it for God or something like that, or I can't. What is it? The line?
I think it's something along the lines of
shit is short-term memory.
No, it's fine. But I'm fairly sure his character's meant to be like 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
So we're going back to a time in Ireland when kind of change in Ireland, which was long before the kind of change that we know, and the Troubles and the kind of black and tans and England's fucking basically just decimation of that culture. It was before then. I think it was when Christianity was introduced. So the fact that he's a vampire, and the kind of the traditional sort of vampiric aversion to Christianity and God, I think is no mistake as well.
Yes.
Presumably he's lived through a lot of Irish oppression. This Irish vampire, Rennick, I think is called.
Yeah. I just thought it was a really, again, just a bit of layering for the villain that also ties into the kind of broader themes of the movie. I thought was so excellent and excellently and tastefully done.
Yes, there's a wonderful moment in it where you've just experienced this really soulful and really deep kind of series of songs from these musicians playing in this old sort of abandoned mill or something. A lot of sort of bluesy music, and then these sort of merry band of vampires come along, and they sing a song called like Pick Poor Robin Clean.
It's more country music, isn't it? Like
I love the idea that they've just totally misjudged the evening.
the vibe.
yeah. But like what happens then is they could have just been the butt of a joke, but what actually happens is they go away and sing something a lot more soulful themselves. Will You Go Lassie Go, I think it's called, Wild Mountain Time, which is like actually sort of a Scottish song as well as an Irish one. Right. But I like the idea that he's sort of misjudged the evening, gone away and thought, well, we have powerful songs as well. Let's get a load of this, right? We can do this, and this is about like my country and
the things we've gone through.
I think the chief reason why they're still antagonists is their attitude towards melding cultures and amalgamating and therefore diluting them. I think that's the kind of ultimate reason, the misjudgment there is basically when you become a vampire, you inherit the memories of those that you have bitten,
but you don't truly know the experience.
Exactly. So like an approximation. So you're going to learn Cantonese or Mandarin. I can't remember the language, but you're never going to have lived the experience that this woman had before they were bitten. So like really clever, really thoughtful on both sides of the coin as well. Like isn't shy because the Irish music's so great in it as well. There's the Rocky Road to Dublin and stuff. Like you can tell I've been listening to the soundtrack.
It's great.
Because it's just and it's kind of if nothing else, although it is a lot more, it's just an exhibition of these like wonderful, deep-seated sort of musical numbers.
It's an idea, isn't it, that culture should be shared, but it should never stray away from where it came from.
Yes.
And I think in the process of commodification, that happens.
Exactly, yeah.
And, particularly when there's profit to be made,
yeah.
There is, it's only ever going to take it away from where it came from. And given that this music comes from such a powerful place, and that sense of belonging that was taken from their ancestors, it feels particularly powerful in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the reason that there's a kind of, when they're singing that kind of country ballad, the kind of jaunty one, and they don't get let in, there's a kind of feeling there that obviously a lot of the people in this barn, majority of America, they're still not able to get on a bus. So like, this is their one chance to cut loose properly and kind of become absorbed in their own culture and their kind of own history again. It's just like the one night they have, and it's not like an act of segregation when they're turned away necessarily. It's just like, this is the wrong place for you, at this moment in time. I loved that. I thought it was probably the best bit of the film, actually, is that segment, right up until the partygoers leave. I thought that was like the special bit of the film.
I thought there was real confidence in the build-up. I think that's why the themes work so well, because you don't really see a great deal of action in the film for the least the first. How long is the film? Is it a couple of hours?
2 hours 10, I think.
I'd say the first hour and 20, hour and a half.
There's a lot of setup, and
I just thought that how refreshing is that to have like. And again, it goes right back to what we were saying about Fruitvale Station as an intimacy to the themes, because of that confidence in the build-up. And perhaps you don't necessarily praise it on that level with a film like Fruitvale Station because of its independent credentials, right? So there's greater freedom narratively because of that, being an independent movie. But I think for a film like this, you can really see that there's a. You're kind of, it's earthy. You're among it. Which I thought was really interesting in the way, in kind of not understanding the plight of the characters, but kind of like being with them. It's sort of and sort of briefly being a part of what they're going through. And it really strengthens the connection to the themes that really blossom with the music and the act and the sort of the appearance of Jack O'Connell's vampire and everything that happens afterwards. And I just thought that, because of how delicately paced it was up until that kind of thematic explosion, which works so well, it also, there's a real kind of genre, kind of solid moment of genre catharsis and the ending of the film that just works as a result of that build-up. That willingness to let things just simmer and for ideas to feel kind of omnipresent. I just couldn't really fault it in that way.
No, definitely not. It's very well paced, even though it spends a long time introducing you to the various kind of characters, but because it's important that you know a lot about them and you know a lot about their history and you know a lot about I can't remember. I think it's Stack's wife, who is sort of quite into alternative medicine and she knows a lot about the folklore of things like vampires, so she knows what they are, right? She calls them hakes for a bit and then she realizes they're not. But like, I thought when I was introduced to her it would be like a scene, and then it's just like, you're gonna be with Stack and that's it, right? She comes back and like you realize there's a reason why you've spent so much time with them, and like in that one scene they share together, there's a lot of complexity that's revealed about them and their relationship and why he's left and why he's come back as well. And so when the kind of when they do hit the ground running, it's all the more exciting and there's real stakes, like, no pun intended, but maybe cut that out. I don't know. Holy shit,
don't cut it out.
Really liked it, and it's only grown on me since I've seen it as well. I keep thinking about it, and I keep thinking about the kind of richness of the cinematography as well, and shot in IMAX, presented in like a really very, very narrow. I say narrow. Narrow is the wrong word. It's actually the opposite of narrow. It's very wide, but like a letterbox format. 276:1, I think it is, which adds to the sort of. I guess I don't really know what it adds to, but it definitely makes it feel unique.
I think it speaks again to Coogler's kind of insistence as a filmmaker to he's not cutting corners narratively, and I think visually, stylistically. I think they had quite a lot of trouble finding places to.
Yeah, they delayed the release date. I think, for that
because
reason.
they couldn't find the places that would like go through all the film and
develop it,
the
all. Labs and stuff. Yeah,
which is sad, really.
It is. Yeah, I think that's a bit of a broader problem. Actually, it's quite hard to develop.
Yeah, I think because obviously the thing about these technological innovations, and I think we've said this quite a lot, but obviously the industry's still reeling from streaming. And I don't think people have really still quite taken stock of the damage. I mean, the damage can be sort of there for all to see, but the kind of cries for innovation tend to be coming from people that obviously have a financial stake because it's cheaper. So it has an impact more broadly on the kind of processes that you can kind of have been so intrinsic to the filmmaking experience and the film viewing experience. Although interestingly, I did watch an interview. This is a brief aside, with David Cronenberg, and he said he hated working with film. He will never work with film ever again.
Wow. Okay.
But his reasons are a little bit more personal to him as a creative. It's not about money or anything like that. I think
some people just like to improvise, don't they?
Yeah.
Film that isn't great at affording you that luxury.
No,
I think
it's expensive.
It's expensive. You can't see what you've shot until the day afterwards.
No.
If you're lucky. I mean, they're probably not dailies anymore, like you say, because of the labs. If they're taking this long to process, weeklies, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
Pull up a chair.
Yeah. I do think it's worth him filming it like this because you can tell that every sort of frame is considered. And every kind of setup has a payoff in visually, right? And not, a film like Fruitvale Station, a film like Fruitvale Station doesn't need that because it has that sort of scrappy indie quality. But a film like this with the sort of heavy, steeped in history kind of stuff, it really does need a
texture.
And a composition that you can tell is there.
You get it from film, don't you? I mean, we've never worked with film, but I can imagine it would be this kind of area would be really difficult to do.
Oh man, yeah, it's got to be hard. I think, not just being able to press play immediately afterwards that's
a luxury, man.
It just means you have to have faith, a lot of faith in the people that you work with. It's worth mentioning the deal Coogler got.
Oh yes, this is cooking up a bit of
strife amongst the Hollywood bigwigs.
Yeah. So Coogler, what was the stipulations in his contract that he would take first a portion of the profit from first ticket sales,
first dollar gross? Yeah, so I think it's the net profit. If it starts to make money, some of it will go in his pocket, which isn't that unusual to get a back end deal. He probably forfeited some of his upfront salary.
Okay.
In order for that to happen.
Yeah, that's not unheard of.
That's not unheard of. No. But the thing that is unheard of is 25 years after the release of this film, the rights will revert to Coogler.
Yeah.
So usually that happens like 70 years, something stupid, after the film's released, by which time most of the people involved in the creation of it will be dead. Yeah. But in this case, the rights will revert to him, which means he'll be able to say no to people like Prime, Amazon Prime, etc. from streaming it if the landscape is such. Basically, it'll be his again, which is great. I think it's really good.
I think the reason why so many people in Hollywood are pissed off is because it kind of disempowers the studios, right?
Yeah,
the studios lose the product
completely. Yeah. It becomes
goes back to the creatives,
which is
or
great.
creative.
Yeah. I don't know if it's tied to like a production company he owns or whatever.
Yes, he does have one. What the fuck's his name? Proximity.
But like
Films, I think it's called.
That'll be him. I don't know what the phrase would be. He's the big wig in that sense, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing to do. I think it safeguards the legacy of the film, perhaps.
Yeah, which is it's doing really well and it's garnered a really, really positive response. I think there was a Variety article that kind of shat all over the opening of it, and like a lot of celebrities kind of came out saying how much they enjoyed it and how successful it is.
The opening. What was the problem with?
There was the article basically said,
not to sort of wallow in the.
No, it's fine. It was interesting actually. Yeah, the article was skeptical about the film's chances to turn a profit. based on its opening weekend, even though its opening weekend was really strong.
Okay.
And they cited Coogler's first dollar gross as a factor in that, and his deal, and they basically kind of said it wasn't going to make money, and they kind of were very disparaging of it. And then like Ben Stiller and Tom Cruise and people have just come to the defense of the film, which I think's sort of interesting. Maybe what I'm saying now is a bit tabloidy, but it is interesting that people are like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, yeah.
Film
It's
made
in
like
their interest, isn't it? They've probably got some fucker at Variety that's like a studio shill.
Yeah,
this is all conjecture.
Oh, well,
we're gonna get sued, aren't we?
I'm sure there's some kind
That
of
and Ron Seal.
way to short the if a film does badly. There's a weird way of making money from insurance.
Yeah. I mean, it's always easy to see the kind of money side of any kind of artistic industry as evil.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of it is time it's merited, and you know, I fucking fair play to Coogler for doing that. I think power to him. I mean, he can, like we say, he can safeguard the legacy of that movie.
Yeah,
you know, and that's just something. I think it is important that the people who make these movies retain that creative control.
Yeah, definitely. And for maybe the money to be distributed a bit more fairly, and maybe even in service of another film like it, or or a kind of a different project for him. And he might end up doing that with all of his films going forward. And
I'm just amazed they said yes.
Yeah, it must have been. I don't know.
They think because of his sort of his track record of like making sort of thematically earnest, kind of but highly financially lucrative blockbusters. Do you reckon that was enough for them to make them think, "Fuck it, we'll do that"?
Yeah, or maybe they thought. I mean, this is more cynical version. They might have thought that all of the profits would have been from the front end, i.e. cinematic release, and then the film wouldn't last in the long term. Maybe that's the kind of attitude they had towards the film, and they thought, "Fuck yeah, you can have it back in 25 years. It's not going to be relevant.
We won't want it. Yeah,
who cares?
Yeah. Interesting."
And then clearly, you know, I think that's a kind of bad way to think. I'm not saying they did think that, but if they did think that way, then you're idiots.
Cinemas first.
Yeah. Yeah, which is great, and I hope that kind of deal kind of enters more into the fray, because it may well birth more like smaller cottage industries around the place, and which means potentially better movies and better,
and just a wider spread of movies coming from different places. I mean, you know, it's interesting that. You know, the breakup of the studios and preventing them, you know, obviously the sort of collapse of classic Hollywood, you know, a lot of that was down to the fact the government were concerned about monopolies. Which, you know, it's weird that those monopolies have kind of found their way back in to the studio system, like Disney, for example, owning absolutely fucking everything. You know, it's you know, it's interesting, and I think it's these kinds of moves that bridge the gap between these kinds of movies and the smaller kind of studios that can make the little films. And because, you know, that's the problem with monopoly, isn't it? I think you don't, you know, everything comes from one place, and I think that's problematic.
Yeah, definitely.
In any industry, but particularly for any kind of cultural industry, it's hugely problematic.
Oh, hugely. Yeah. Like if your sole purpose is to distribute entertainment, which is meant to sort of reflect the times now and also past and future, it's not good. It's not healthy.
No, and if they have that control over the future of your product, what they can do what they want with it. They cut things out, take things out, change things,
regrade them.
Yeah.
Which I know sounds stupid, but like
throwing a CGI,
that's a big problem at the moment. Yeah.
Hayden Christensen.
Yeah. Yeah. Get a jab. Put the Jabba scene back in it.
Yeah. In Sinners.
Yeah.
For some reason.
The Jabba the Hutt scene in Sinners.
Ryan Coogler's like, what?
Did you know that we walked out of the film and there's like 2 post-credit scenes?
Do you know what? I found this out the other day and I still don't know what they are.
I do.
Can you tell me?
Yeah. So the first one is just more performance. So I don't think we missed out. More singing, more kind of showcasing of the genre and what the genre's become today, which I thought was an interesting idea. Maybe a bit jarring in the context of most of it's like a kind of 1930s set. But the second one, 2 of the vampires, including Michael B. Jordan, come into the place he's performing and sit down and watch him. So they've survived apparently.
Is Haley Stanfield the other?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah. So they're sort of keeping a
because they have an interesting arc in the film anyway, don't they? Before they become vampires.
Yes, they do. Yeah,
yeah.
She's this kind of lover that he's kind of semi-discarded, but you can tell there's a kind of brimming romance there.
Yeah,
already.
I think a large part of that reason is because of her cultural heritage and the laws around mixed race relationships.
Of course, yes, there's a kind of disconnect between them that they kind of fuse back together as the evening draws on.
Yes,
which is really nice actually. She's great in it as well.
Really good, actually. Good. I mean, she's not an actress that I've ever, and I don't mean this in the way like I just disregarded her, which I didn't, but she's not someone that ever really comes to mind. But she was superb.
Oh, she really held her own.
Yeah,
in a lot of the scenes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sound so dismissive of her, but I just mean she's not an actress that you think about a great deal.
No, it's just an interesting casting choice. Yeah. I don't know a great deal about what else she's done. So
she did the Marvel thing, the TV show about Hawkeye.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
Which in True Grit, she's good in True Grit.
Oh yeah, that's a good film. That's a great film, actually. I always forget how good that is, and I rewatch it. And I'm like,
I've not seen it for years.
Yeah.
I should give it
Watch
a go.
it again. It's like
I remember thinking it was lesser Coen Brothers. Maybe that's something.
Yeah, I thought that initially, but then I saw it again, and I was like, oh no, this is great. This is
I'll do that.
Upper tier Coen.
Upper tier.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that. That's a cool scene.
Yeah.
Does the guy playing guitar notice?
I think they have a chat or something. I don't know. I've only read about it, but like I think there's an odd kind of common ground that they have clearly found, despite the fact these are sort of blood-sucking monsters. They're able to interact with each other, which I thought was an interesting way to end it.
That is cool.
It just goes to show how much Coogler clearly cared about the villains. The complexity of the villains, which is something which just isn't really explored enough, I don't think.
Well, I mean, not to sort of go back into the world of Marvel, because I do get sick of talking about it, even in the context of Black Panther, but Marvel's best villain, Killmonger, probably.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
You know, Coogler's work and Jordan's work, you know.
That's true, yeah, the bit with the museum and all that
it's
stuff.
great. It's so good.
It's like the best scene in the film.
And he's definitely up there as the best villain, I think, that Marvel have ever had.
No, okay, yeah. Nice.
Trying to think of a really shit villain to compare it to for comic effect, but I can't.
MODOK.
Oh god, yeah, he was shit, wasn't he? Yeah, MODOK.
Yeah.
But they tried to pan it off as a joke, didn't they?
Yeah.
Like, oh, he's shit because it's a joke. No, he's not. He's shit because he's shit, and you fucked it.
Yeah. And also, you're
Peyton Reed.
doing a disservice to the person who drew him. He's actually quite an imposing looking. Like
he's not. Yeah, weird looking thing, isn't it? But
yeah.
The character's not Peyton Reed.
Yeah.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then.
Yes,
episode 79.
Yeah,
nearly at 80.
I know.
80.
Not that far off 100 now, are we?
Oh, imagine that.
What are we going to do for that? Cineboys on the road.
We'll do Thunderbolts for that.
When it comes out on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Just review it from a hotel room in Bognor or something.
Oh, yeah, we'll book a hotel in Bognor Regis. Yeah, you bring George along, I bring Hannah.
Yeah, they just have to sit in the corner, disinterested.
We'll pretend it's like a surprise, like weekend away, and they're like, "Why did you bring Danny?
Why did you bring Ben?" Well, actually, can you help us with the light setup? Because it's a new room, we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Not that we know what we're doing now, but yeah.
Oh no.
I think we should do something special for the big 100.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yes. So next week, we're going to do another Hidden Gems episode.
Yeah, there's not a great deal out that we thought was worth talking about.
Yeah, we were kind of intrigued by Gareth Evans' Havoc.
Havoc, yeah.
But we very recently done an episode where we talked about the Raid films.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done a couple of other bits and pieces, but I think, and action cinema we've kind of talked about a lot. We've mined that genre pretty heavily.
Yeah.
Probably that and horror, two genres we talk about the most. So, I think we need to wait a while on that before we revisit.
Yes.
So I will check it out, but
just for danger of repeating ourselves, probably best if we.
Yeah, and we do that a lot anyway. So we don't want it to be too overt. So we're going to go for our Hidden Gems ep. We've got Jan's Women of the Dunes.
Yep.
Which I have seen. It's pretty strong in the memory still because it left a pretty a pretty lasting impact.
Really?
Pretty lasting
I'm really
impact.
looking forward to it.
Well, that
Sounds
means.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking good.
Okay,
Really, really
nice.
good. And Wreck.
Yes.
Graham Slingsby.
Yeah. The
Sorry,
film
I'll-
isn't called Wreck Graham. The film's just called Wreck. And Graham Slingsby was the gentleman who recommended it.
Yes, dear friend. So yeah, I'll be asking you boys to provide some kind of sort of write up for the film,
Yeah.
be that then filmed or audio, or just getting us to read it.
Yeah. Or Morse code as well.
Morse code.
Fine.
Yeah.
I'm actually.
Take a while,
It will.
Yeah.
3.5 hour long episode.
but you know, I think our loyalty of our viewers and listeners is all but assured, so we
Yeah,
can push
yeah.
them as far as we want. We could just spend an hour going.
It's the audio
Probably be better,
equivalent.
actually.
Yeah. It's the audio equivalent of IMAX.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
Morse code transmissions. No, of course I'm joking. Looking forward to Women of the Dunes and Wreck as well, because it's been a while since I've seen Wreck.
That'll be like, I think I've said this a few times, but when a film, you haven't seen a film for such a long time, it's almost like watching it for the first time again.
Oh, cool, man.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Me too.
So yeah, we'll be doing that next week. In the meantime, thank you for getting to the end of another episode.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed this one. It was a nice
Yeah.
palate cleanser after the absolute shit show that was a Minecraft movie.
Yeah,
to
lovely
get back
stuff.
into something good that actually makes you feel positive about movies again.
Best theatrical experience I've had in a while.
Yeah,
So,
it'd definitely be up there as far as I can tell regarding films of the year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
But yeah, anyway, in the meantime, thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take
See
it
you.
easy.
See you then.
Bye.